Kakadosh Boker Tov. I hope all is well. We're just going to continue with Daf Lametet Amud Bet 39b. Okay, so Daf Lametet on the top, right? We're talking about as follows. We said over there that we already learned that you could actually plant together in one aruga, in one furrow, in one row, right? You're allowed to actually plant them as long as there's going to be a space in between. Because we said that an aruga, which is 6 by 6 tefachim, remember that every single tefach is 8 centimeters. So it's 48 centimeters square, 6 by 6 tefachim. Zorim betocha chamisha ziranim. You're allowed to plant 5 different types of species, right? According to the 4 species on the 4 ruchot aruga, and 1 in the middle. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4 on the sides, and then you have 1 in the middle, and that's how you're allowed to do it, and there's no problem. Okay. So now says the Gemara, Ma'udetem, I would have thought to say Hanimile. When are these words? Bizra'in, only in, how do you call them? Only in grains or like seeds, yeah. Aval birakot, but in vegetables, no, because the shorashim of the yirakot, they come and they are going to actually go and get nurture from the ground, and therefore you can't do that because then it's going to start mixing and matching. Kamash Malan comes to teach you that the shiur of the Mishnah that says actually does help even for vegetables as well. Okay, so says the Gemara, lemeimra dirakot alima mizraim. Are you going to tell me that vegetables are even better than zraim, and therefore they actually take more nurture from the ground? But now we learned in the Mishnah in Kilaim, kol minei zraim and zorim eruga achat, kol minei yirakot zorim eruga achat. We says that really be'emet it's opposite. Zraim, you're not allowed to come and plant it in one aruga, but yirakot, you are. So therefore, it sees from here that zraim actually take much more nurture than the yirakot. What takes more nurture from the ground? The vegetables or these seeds, which are going to become, whether it's grains or whatever it is, it's the seeds. So says the Gemara, no. Ma'u the tema, I would have thought to say that if it wasn't for the words of Rav, Hani maror means zraim ninu, that this maror is means zraim, right? And therefore, that's why you're not allowed to come and plant them all together. Kamash Malan comes to teach you that the maror have to be a yerek. It has to be a vegetable. Okay, and that's why you're allowed to do this. Zraim salka daitach, right? Do you really think that we're talking about the maror is talking about a zraim? But now we learned yirakot. Meaning, what was the Mishnah? How do we start the Mishnah? The Mishnah started, Velu yirakot, shadam yotzei b'yom chovato b'Pesach. Right? These are yirakot. That means the maror has to be a yerek. Has to be a vegetable. It can't be any type of seeds. That's an yirakot. The Tani v'kapara elu yirakot. The Tani v'shmel elu yirakot. Everything is yirakot. So answers the Gemara, chazeret itzrichale. You needed it for the chazeret. Why? Salka daita chamina. I would have thought to say, hoil v'sofa leakshot. Since at the end it's going to become hard. Native la rav chatfei. You should give it more space, right? You should actually give it more space. Lava Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina, didn't Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina say, kelach shel kruv shuksha, when you have the stalk of the kruv, of the cabbage that becomes hardened, marchivin lo betrova, you have to actually come and distance it from other seeds, right? The betrova. Almas you see, you have to leave it more because since it's going to become harder, so you need to actually give it more of a space. Yeah, so he comes and he says, right? It says over here, because basically since it becomes harder, so therefore the shorashim, the roots go deeper, and therefore they needs more space. So he says, Hachanami, so to hear native la rav chatfei, Kamash Malan comes to teach you that you don't say that, right? And therefore you're allowed to even plant even the chazeret with other types of vegetables, kiyuchatan, and there's no problem whatsoever, which means even the chazeret, because the other types of maror, the stalks don't become hard, but the chazeret, the lettuce, it does become hard. So he's saying that's what we were trying to say over here. The chidush is that you don't need more space, even though it's going to be over here like this. It's going to become hard. Okay, until here we're clear. We don't need the space. Okay, that was the chidush by Chazeret. Next, we learned in the Mishnah that on all these types of maror, right, you're going to be to the chovah whether it's lachin or yeveshim. Yeah, whether it's going to be lach or yavesh, which means moist or dry. Okay, so now comes the Gemara, and the Gemara says, yeah, as follows. Yeah, he says like this. Amar Rav Chasta, says Rav Chasta, lo shanu, what are we dealing with? You could be to the chuvah whether it's going to be moist or yavesh. Ela bekelach, only when it's going to be in the stalks of the vegetables. Why? Because since it's thick, it doesn't get so dry until it doesn't have taste. Aval be'alin, but when we're talking about the leaves of the vegetable, lachin in only when it's moist, but if it's going to be dry, then no. Why? Because when it's going to be dry, it doesn't have there's no tam anymore. It's no taste. Yeah, when it becomes too dry. So therefore, it has to be that it's a little bit moist. If it's not moist, you're not going to be zechova. So says the Gemara, the hamidiktani seifa. Let's see the seifa. The seifa said that you're going to be zechova bekelach shelahen. You're going to be zechova even with the stalks. So therefore, mikal terei shalim. If you're going to tell me now, look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah said these are the vegetables you're going to be zechova. A, B, C, D, E, whatever it is. Then the Gemara, the Mishnah says whether they're lachin or yeveshin. Whether it's lach or yavesh, moist or dry. Now, what did we just explain? We thought the havamina was moist or dry for everything. Says that no. Only in the stalks. Because if the leaves are dry, no. But then 2 seconds later, the Mishnah comes and says, what does it say? The Mishnah comes and says 2 seconds later, you're going to be tzorcha with the stalks. So therefore, it's mashma. That beforehand, we were talking about whether the alin or the stalks. We were talking about anything. Either or. Yeah? Okay? So that's what we're trying to say until now. Okay? So then that's the Gemara is asking. Okay? So says the Gemara, right? You're right. Pirusha kamefarish. We're actually just explaining it. Ki ketani, when do we learn melachim nevishina kelach? Amen. When do we learn whether it's moist or dry? Only on the stalks. Amen. So says the Gemara, really, be'emet, they were explaining it. When did we say ben lachim ben yiveshim? When do we say you're going to be tzuchah, whether it's going to be moist or dry? Akelach, on the stalk. So therefore, the latter part of the Mishnah was only just explaining the former part of the Mishnah. Okay? Very good. So Meitvei, so we're going to ask a question. Yotzin bahenu vekelach shelahem melachim leveshim divrei mean. You're going to be tzuchah with these vegetables and in the kelach shelahen, whether it's yavin v'veshim v'chachamim omrim, v'chachamim say lachin yotzin behen. Only when it's going to be lach. If it's going to be yavesh, you're not going to be tzechovah. V'shavim, but they both agree to be and chachamim. Sheyotzin behen kimushin, that you're going to be tzechovah when they're a little bit dry. Avalo kivushin, but not when they're kavush. Kavush is pickled. Very good. Velo shlukin, or not excessively cooked. Lo mavushalin, or not cooked. The general rule is kol sheyesh bo ta'am maror yotzim bo. As long as you have the ta'am maror, you're going to be yitzei chovah. V'chol she'en ta'am maror en yotzim bo. And if you don't have the ta'am maror, you're not going to be yitzei chovah. Yeah, that's what we're trying to say. So says the Gemara. Yeah, he comes and he says targuma kelach. You're right. We're talking about on the kelach, which means that which Rabbi Meir is coming and saying in the Yeveshin, right? That which he says, Rabbi Meir, ben lachim, ben Yeveshin, is only going on over kelach shelahen, and not when he says bahen. Yotzin bahen, it's not bahen, right? It's only just in the kelach and shelahen, right? And therefore it's not a proof anymore, because again, it's only on the kelach, right? It's only on the stalks that it's going to be ben lachim, ben Yeveshin. Because on the leaves in itself, it has to be lach. Okay? Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita. Yeah, the Braita comes and it says as follows. Yeah, it says you're not going to be tzechovah when it's a little bit, right? You're not when it's a little bit dry. You are going to be tzechovah when it's a little bit dry. Okay, so there's a machloket if it's a little bit dry, are you tzechovah or not? According to the first shita, which is Tanakama, you're not going to be tzechovah. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok, you are. So Bai Rami bar Chama comes on Rechama and he asks the following question: Can you be tzechovah with maror or maasesh in Yerushalayim? So remember, when we spoke about maasesh in Yerushalayim, we spoke about matzah, we spoke about challah. Are you obligated in challah or not? We spoke about an etrog, and now we're speaking about maror. Yeah, so are you going to be tzechuvah with maror in Maaser Sheni Yerushalayim? Yeah, somebody once asked me, Rabbi, am I obligated to come and to eat the maror? I told him, why wouldn't you? He says, because my mother-in-law is already here. Yeah, so he comes and he says, so that's it. I'm already patur, I already have the maror. You have to start eating it as well. You don't have to eat it as well. Yeah, yeah, it's recorded. Right? No, mother-in-law jokes is always permitted. No. Yeah, fine. Yeah. So Aliba de Rabbi Akiva, yeah, no, the truth is my mother-in-law's not tzedeket. That's what we always say, no?
Lo yatsa, because he's only seeing her, he's not tasting her.
Ah, okay, fine, very good. You're saying that's why you have to taste it before. Okay, fine. Aliba de Rabbi Akiva, yeah, it says according to Rabbi Akiva, that he says that matzah in Maaser Sheni is going to be tahor in Yerushalayim, which means that you're allowed to eat it. Lo tibay lecha, for sure you could eat it. Because if matzah deoraita, matzah is deoraita. And if matzah is deoraita, and you could be Yitzhak Chova when Maaser Sheni Yerushalayim with the matzah, so kavachomer maror de Rabbanan mibai. At the time of the maror, which is the Rabbanan, is a question at all. Why is maror the Rabbanan? Because midin Torah, there's no chiyuv of maasrot in Yerakot. And the entire concept of by Yerakot, you have to take off maaser, is the Rabbanan. Nowadays, there's another reason why it's the Rabbanan. Why? Because it says that matzot umurim yochlu, that only when there's a korban Pesach is the maror mideoraita. When there's no korban Pesach, the maror is midrabanan. And therefore, nowadays, we don't have a korban Pesach, so the maror is midrabanan. So that's why anytime that you have a doubt or anytime that you have something, it's always a din derabanan, it's not a din doraita. What's an nafkamina? Many nafkaminas. A person that's sick. So if it's a doraita, you still have to be stringent to many things. But if it's going to be the rabbanan, you can be much more lenient. Or there's a machloket. So safek the rabbanan lekula. So I've got a can this be used as maror? Can this? Is it enough?
Rabbi, you do maaser on maror?
No, that's what he's saying. The maaser of maror is only on yirakot. Is only midrabanan. So therefore, that's why he's saying the entire concept of maaser sheni is only drabanan on maror. It's not doraita.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Okay, fine. 1 second. Let me just put this on because I don't have battery. Okay. Okay, very good. So now says the Gemara. Yeah. So he says, Ki tibay lecha. So then when is the doubt then? The question is, Aliba de Rabbi Yosef Galileh, according to Shitat Rabbi Yosef Galileh. What's halacha? Because remember, according to Rabbi Yosef Galileh, you're not going to be Zechova with matzah of Maaser Sheni Yerushalayim. So he says, "B'matzah doraita udelo nafik." Only by matzah you're not going to be Tzechova. B'maror derabanan you are going to be Tzechova. Or Dilmar maybe called the Takinu Rabbanan can do doraita tikun. Whenever the rabbis instituted something, they instituted like doraita, and therefore just like over here, it's going to be like a doraita. You're not going to be Tzechova. So says the Gemara, Rava says, "Mistabra matzah umaror." It's mistaber that since matzah umaror they have a hekesh between them. So therefore, just like you're not going to be tzechova with matzah, you're not going to be tzechova with maror. Meaning it says, "Matzot umrorim yocheluhu." On matzah maror, you're going to eat the korban pesach. You have to eat the korban pesach with matzah and maror. So the fact that it's juxtaposed, there's a connection, a proximity between matzah and maror. We apply both halachot together. That means even though matzah is doraita and maror is only going to be derabanan because of the maaser is only derabanan over there. Nowadays it's derabanan because of another reason, but also because of the entire concept of maaser sheni is derabanan by yirakot. So therefore, that's what he said. But still, since it's juxtaposed, it's brought together. So therefore, it still has the same halachot. Just like by Maaser Sheni, you're not allowed to be Sechova with matzah of Maaser Sheni according to the Shita. The second Shita. Who's the second Shita? Rabbi Yosef Galileh. Right? Because remember, according to Rabbi Kiva, you are. According to Rabbi Galileh, not. So to you, by Maror, you're not going to be Sechova. Says the Mishnah. Mishnah Lametet Amud Bet. Yeah, 39b. The Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, En Shorin et Amulsan. The Tarnagolim, you're not allowed to soak like a bran in water for the Tarnagolim because it becomes chametz. Aval chultim, but you're allowed to throw it into boiling hot water, right? Because once it becomes in the boiling hot water, it's not going to become chametz anymore. Okay. A woman's not allowed to soak, right? In order to use it on her flesh, she's not allowed to soak this mursan in order that it should go right to take it into the milchatz. Aval shafai bivsara yavesh, but she could put it on her skin when it's dry. Okay, it can get wet. Because remember, the second it gets wet, it could become chametz. But she could put it dry on her skin. A person should not start chewing on wheat and then put it on his makah, right on his wound. Why? Because it becomes chametz through the rock. And I would have thought to say that he wanted to make matzah. So what did he do? He chewed some wheat, he put it on his makkah, and now all of a sudden he's going to start having matzah grow out of his hand. Right? But rather, no. The reason why is because it was like a healing process. I don't know exactly what type of healing, but that's what it says over here. It says here, Rashi says, Chitim leusot moilot lefuat makkah. It actually helps for refuat makkah. Right? It helps for wounds. Yeah, nowadays you have, Bactroban and this and hydrocortisone and all these different things. The olden days used to take wheat, chew it, put it on, gamarnu. Yeah, that's what they used to do. You're not allowed to do that. Why? Because of the rock, the phlegm. The phlegm could make a chametz. Says the Gemara, these are things which are not going to come through chametz. It says ha'afui, any type of a dough which was baked, because once it was baked, it doesn't become chametz again. Even if you're going to afterwards soak it in water, or vamushal if you're going to cook it, or chalush if you come and you threw it into boiling hot water, so that's it. It's not going to become chametz anymore. So says the Gemara, mevushal. It says, what are you talking about? If you're going to cook it normally, it's going to become chametz when you're in the middle of the cooking process. So says the Gemara, yeah, Amar Papa says, ha'afui should be shlok kamar. No, we're talking about it was baked and then afterwards you cooked it. So if it was already baked and now you cook it, it's not going to become chametz anymore. So Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda says, Omer, kemach shenafal letocho delef. What happens is now if you have flour, that all of a sudden water starts dripping from the roof. Yeah, so water tip, yeah, it starts dripping, drop, and it goes into this thing. So he says over here, afilu kol hayom kulo. Huh? Okay. Yeah, it says over here, even if it's going to be, no, but this is not the matzah, this is flour. It says here, afilu kol hayom kulo, even if it's going to be the entire day, eno bali dechemut. There's no chametz. It does not become chametz. Why? Because basically it says over here that it's not something which is constant, which is going to stop. That's what it says here. That means basically the fact that it keeps on dropping more and more water, it's not going to let it become chametz. Becoming chametz is if you put the water and then you let it to rise. But the fact that it keeps on getting beaten on the head with more and more water, even though it's a drop after another drop, it's not going to become chametz. Amar Rav Papa says Rav Papa, that's only if it's going to be drop after drop, which means that it's mamash. That means without any moments in between. Because if not, then it could become chametz in between. Meaning if it's going to be one drop, and after a minute or after 2 minutes, whatever it is, then yes, it could become chametz. But if it's drop after drop, no problem. Yeah, constant drops. Yeah, it doesn't say how long, but it just says just says tifar chatif. What did you say?
No, once it stops in 18 minutes, it becomes a little. It starts.
Yes, it starts becoming chametz. Yeah. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Amri Divrei Rabbi Shila, they taught in the academy of Rabbi Shila and the Bet HaMidrash Rabbi Shila, Vatika, which is basically a type of a food which is made out of flour with salt. Shari, it's permitted on Pesach and there's no chametz. So says the Gemara, how could you say that? Vatanya Vatika Asura. I thought they said it's going to be prohibited. So says the Gemara, Lakash, it's not a question. It all depends. If you made it with shemen and melach, which is oil and salt, so then it's going to be mutar. Because remember, shemen is like meperot, it's like fruit juice. So it's from mutar, but it doesn't become chametz. But if you did it with water and salt, it's going to become chametz. So Amar Marzuta says, Lo limchi inche inish kidra bekimcha davishna. It's prohibited for a person to come and to make a belilava, a thick dough, yeah, inside of a kidrav kemach, which is made out of chitim and klayot, which is made out of chitim, which are toasted kernels. Okay, because even though, right, when you're going to take it out, it's still not going to become chametz. Still, dilma lo bashil shapi, maybe it wasn't fully roasted, it wasn't fully cooked, but and then it will become chametz. So Amr of Yosef says of Yosef, lo liklot inish, a person is prohibited to come and to do chalita. Remember, chalita means that you're going to throw it into the hot boiling water. Okay, Mem Amud 48:1 on the top. 2 garinim chitim at the same time. Why? Because maybe one of them is going to go on and it's going to sit inside of the other sedek of the other one. And then you don't have the water coming up from all the different corners. So since the water doesn't get to all the 4 corners, it's going to become chametz. Okay, fine. Abaye says, Lo lichroch inish tre shibole bade. A person is prohibited to come and to cook 2 shibolim together, 2 shibole chitim together. Because maybe the water is going to come out from one and go into the other one, and then it's going to become chametz. So Amale Rava comes and he says, if so, then even one of them. Maybe it's going to go from one part and it's going to go into the other part. That means just like if you have 2, right, it's going to come out of one and go into the other. So too, if you have 1, it's going to come out from the bottom and go to the top, or the top to the bottom. So the Gemara says, no. He says, but Rava says, we're talking about here meperot, which is basically fruit juice. Meperot doesn't become chametz. But Abaye actually retracted from that, and he says, that everything which is derech nefilatam of the chitim, it's not going to make it into chametz. Which means that the mechetim, which are coming out during the time that it's going to become in the boiling hot water, right? They could actually come and make the chametz, right? Because they do not come b'derech nefilah. So therefore, they don't have the power to make the chametz in such a form. What does that mean? So it says here because it's not going to be balua inside. It's not going to be nivla in the chitim. Right, because the way that it's going, it doesn't become chametz. Okay, so basically on the way that it's traveling, it doesn't become chametz. So the same thing here. This water, even if it's going to come out from one side, on the way that it's traveling, it does not become chametz. That's what he's saying. The Amar Abaye says, "Hi chatzba davishna." When you're going to come and dry up the wheat into kernels in the oven, sechifa share. When you're going to come and it's going to be upside down, that means that the mouth is going to be downwards. It's going to be permitted, right, to do this. Why? Because basically what happens is the water gets absorbed into the fire and then that's it. But if it's going to be the other way around, which means upwards, it's going to be prohibited. Why? Because the water that comes out, right, are after going to be absorbed inside of the chitim, and it's going to make it into chametz. So Rava comes and he says, "Afilu zakifa nami shari." Even if it's going to be zakuf, it's going to be permitted, right, on Pesach. Why? Because me perot ninhu. It's me perot. Me perot and machmetzim. And anything which is me perot, it's not going to become chametz. Remember, that's a general rule. The fruit juice does not become chametz, and that's why the egg matzah or all these other types of matzahs, there's no problem with it. So Tan Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita, en lo tin seorim bePesach. We're not allowed to do these things on Pesach, which means that we're not allowed to come. It says to wash it right before crushing it. Yeah. En lo tin seorim bePesach. And if you did do any bakeu, if they actually opened up, so then it's going to be prohibited. Lo nidbaku, if it didn't open up, it's going to be permitted. Rabbi Yosef says, shoram bechometz v'chometz somtan. You are allowed to soak it in vinegar, and the vinegar will come and it will stop it from becoming chametz, because the vinegar makes it, like how do you contract? It makes it to, close up, so it won't actually open up to become chametz. Okay, so
barley, right?
we're talking about now we're talking about barley, but before we were talking about even wheat. No, we're talking about chitim. We're talking about even wheat. Yeah.
You're allowed to soak it not in water, but you're allowed to soak it in vinegar.
Vinegar, because the vinegar makes it contract, and therefore it won't actually become chametz. Huh? It will pickle it. What?
Okay.
Yeah, because matzah you're allowed to have or it's not really matzah. Here you just stop having barley, right? But maror you're not allowed to have pickled maror. What I'm saying, but stam you're allowed to have something pickled on Pesach. You can make pickles and all these things on Pesach.
So you can use it as a maror.
You can use it as a maror. No? Okay. So Amar Shmuel says, "En alacha Rabbi Yosef." What does that mean? The chometz, the vinegar, does not have the koach to stop it from becoming chametz. So Amar Rav Chastan Marukva says Rav Chastan name Marukva. Lo nidbakiu mamash. We're not talking about the mamash that they opened up. Ela kol shilu manichal pi chaviv and nidbakom. If you would have put it on top of a chavit and they would have opened up because of the smell of the wine, right? That's already enough to become chametz and it's asur. Shmuel says nidbakiu mamash. Mamash actually open up. So Avid Shmuel uvda bedura deve barachashu. So Shmuel actually did an action like he was pasak halacha in the kfar of bet barachashu of a certain person, right? That it's not going to be, it's going to be mamash nidbakiu mamash. That's the only time that it's going to be prohibited. Amar Rabba says bal nefesh, which is a chassid, lo yiltot. He shouldn't do it at all on Pesach. He shouldn't soak anything on Pesach. Ma'idya bal nefesh. Why only bal nefesh? I thought it was kula. I thought it was everyone that they shouldn't do this. That Tanya was learned in a bright. I not tin sorim Pesach. You're not allowed to do it. So he says no hachi gam. This is what I'm saying. Bal nefesh afilu chitin the shrire lo yiltot. Right? Bal nefesh, even if it's going to be chitin, even though they're very hard, they're much harder than sorim. It's much harder. Wheat is harder than barley. Therefore, it's not going to become chametz that quickly. Still, you're not going to do this as well, even though it's wheat. So Amalei Rav Nachman says Rav Nachman, man detzai le'Abba, whoever is going to listen to Abba, to Rabba, achi nama di pusha, he's going to start eating bad bread, which is not good bread. Teha beravuna litzte, because beravuna they actually do this the chitim on Pesach. Rava baravin litzte, and also the house of Rava they also do the same thing on Pesach, which means that basically since they're doing it, there's no problem because look, these are big religious people. You understand? If they're doing it, you don't have to worry about it. The Rava says asur liltot, you're not allowed to do it. So elahad tanya nutin sorim. So that which we said sorim. Sorinu delo achitesharim. So 1 second. If you're going to tell me that it's asur, here it's only mashma en lotin sorim bePesach. Sorim you're not supposed to, but chitim you're allowed to. So says the Gemara, lo mi ba'e kaman. It means you don't have to mention it. Lo mi ba'e chitin, not only chitin, Since it has different like cracks and crevices, so the water comes in and then it's going to become chametz. But sa'are deshir, but sa'ar seorim, which are the barley, which is very chalak, it's very smooth. I would have said that it's going to be permitted. Kamashman comes teach you that even seorim is going to be asur. So kol sheken that chitim you're not allowed to soak it. Okay. Hadar Amar Rava. Then Rava retracted and he said, "Mutalitzlot, you are allowed to soak the wheat on Pesach." The Tanya was learned to the Braita, Yotzim v'pat nekiya v'adra, tiyev shav nekiya v'lutzah. You're allowed to be tzechova with matzah, which is made out of pat nekiya, which is made out of good fine flour and everything, or pat adra, which is pat kibar. How do you say pat kibar in English? It's like coarse. It's not. How do you call it? It's not menupe. It's not. You didn't sieve it. Yeah.
Of course.
You didn't. Yeah, course. Okay, good. That's what I thought. Of course. V'yev shar nekiya. So he says it's impossible to have pat nekiya unless you're going to do letita, that you're going to soak it. So 8 ways. So they asked Rav Papa to Rava, hakemachim v'satot shel nochrin. What about kemach and solet, flour and fine flour, right, and all these things, right, right from nochrim, from goyim, or shel kfarim is going to be tahor. It's not going to be mekabel tuma, right? Why? Because they don't come and they don't put into water, so they never became susceptible for tuma. The shel krachim, but of the city, it's going to be tamid. Why? Because it became susceptible for tuma. So says the kfarim tama. What's reasoning kfarim that there's no reason? Why doesn't it become tuma? Lamishun dolot today, is it not because they don't soak it in water? The kakari lesolet, and therefore it's going to be called solet. So says the no. Targuma akimcha. We're talking about the kemach, the flour of the kfarim. Okay. Batar denafik. After he came out of the Bet Midrash, Shamar, he said, "My tama lo amali." Why didn't he say mahadamar b'zera? For the fact that b'zera says, "Amar Rav Yirmiyah Shmuel," says Rav Yirmiyah Shmuel, "Chintin shel menachot," the chitim of the fine flour, of the flour offerings, right? You're not going to soak them. Kalilu solet. It's also called solet. So you see that it's called solet even without this. So Hadamar Rava, but then Rava retracted and he said it's a mitzvah liltot. Meaning, look at the thing. Rava at the beginning said it's a sur. Then he said it's mutar. Then he said it's a mitzvah to do it. Look at the different Hadar Amar Ravas. The first Rava was said it's a sur. Right? That was here. Yeah, Rava Amar asur liltot. Then Rava said Hadar Amar Rava, you retracted, said mutar liltot. You're allowed to. Now he says Hadar Amar Rava. Now Rava comes and he says it's a mitzvah liltot. Shneimanu shumatem et hamatzot ilot b'ay letita shemulumai. If you're not going to do letita, which means you're not going to soak it, so then what do you have to watch it for? Watch it for what? It will never become chametz anyway. It doesn't become susceptible for chametz. So says the Gemara, is shimur delisha. If it's going to be when you're kneading it, shimur delisha. It's not called shimur, right? De'amar Rav Huna, but says Rav Huna, tetzakol shenochrim, any type of batzek of a goy, adam melekres omen. You're allowed to eat it whenever you want, even on the night of Pesach, as long as you're going to eat a kazai matzah b'acharona at the end, right? You do have to eat a kazai at the end. Right, for matzah shmura, ba'acharona at the end no, but rishona at the end yes, but at the beginning you don't need to. My tama was reasoning. Mishum delo avad be'u shimur, but there wasn't any shimur. Ve'lavele shimur me'afia ve'lach, and just do the shimur from afia and onwards, which means from baking onwards. Elav shemim na shimur meikar, but you need shimur from the beginning, meaning even before the lisha, before the kneading, you already have to watch over. That's why many times you're going to come and you're going to see matzah, and it says matzah shemura mishata ketzira, or mishata, it doesn't say mishat lisha, from the kneading, from the time of the ketzira, from the time of the reaping. No, shmira, you have to watch it. You have to watch it that it doesn't become chametz. So that's the shmira. The shmira is I'm watching it to make sure that it's not good. So matzah shmura, you have to eat matzah shmura on the night of Pesach. Matzah shmura is not from the time of lisha onwards. It's way beforehand. It's not from the kneading onwards. It's from the time of the reaping. Already from the beginning part of the reaping, that's already when it starts. It has to be shamur. Okay. So mimai, how do you know this? Maybe it's different over there. That when you wanted to do the shimur, there's no shimur anymore. Yeah. So says the Gemara. Yeah, he says, if you did want to do it, the shimur, it's going to be okay. Right? So to year. If you wanted to do the lisha b'shimur, it does help. So says the Gemara, Rava didn't attract. Because he told these people that they're mapchim the tvua, and they tie them together during the time of the reaping season. Ki mapchitu, when you're going to turn it around, afichu leshu mitzvah, do it for as mitzvah, right? Ela alma kasava. So you see from here that he holds sheshimur meikara mitchilatav tzuvah. You need it from the beginning until the end. You need the entire time to be shimur. Okay. Next, more bere Ravina, more the son of Ravina. Yeah, mema mubet. It says here, menakta leime be'arbe. Right, the mother used to take it at the beginning of the Ketzir for the Pesach, right, be'arevot, which means in a shiur melo areva. So she used to actually watch it from the beginning in order to make sure that it's going to be shamur. What does it mean melo areva? Melo arevot arbe, like a whole bunch. Okay, fine. Next, mema mubet, the top line, 2 dots. Hau arba dechite de tava bechishta. There was a sefina of chitim that had drowned in the river before Pesach. Sharia Rava lezbun nochrim. Rava went and he permitted it to sell all these chitim, right, to a goy, not to a Jew. Why? Because since it was soaked in water, it's going to become chametz, and therefore and Pesach is coming. So you can't sell it to a Jew. You're allowed to sell it to a goy. So eitve Rava balevai leRava, as Rava balevai to Rava, beged shava bo kilaim. Imagine right now you have a beged that has kilaim inside of it, and you don't know where the kilaim is. You're not allowed to sell it to a goy. Why? Right? Because we're going to suspect that since it's kilaim and it's not nikat, maybe the goy will have to sell it to a Jew. And it has shanes. You're not allowed to make it a midat for the chamon. Remember the midat for the chamon is like, it's like a smicha, it's like a blanket for the chamor, which they put on underneath the saddle, right? In order not to, that it doesn't rub against the skin, and then it's going to cause the, blemish, or it's going to cause harm to the animal. So you put like a carpet type of thing. You put like a, like a, whatever you want, a towel. I don't know what you would call it over there. Okay? But you're allowed to make tachrim for a mat. You're allowed to make shrouds for a deceased. Why aren't you allowed to give it to a nugoy? Is it not because he's going to sell it to a Jew? So you see from here, just like over there, I'm not allowed to sell kilaim, shatnez to a goy just in case he's going to sell it to a Jew. So too, why am I allowed to come and sell the chitim that they were soaked in water to a goy? Maybe he's going to now come and sell it to a Jew. So answers the Gemara, Hadam Rava, but rather Rava retracted. He said, you could sell it kav to a Jew, but not a lot to one person. That way you could finish it before Pesach. And if you're going to sell him a huge amount, he's not going to finish before Pesach, it's a sur. But if you sell him little by little, you're allowed to. Because for sure he's going to finish it before Pesach and there's no problem. Yeah. Yeah. Tanu Rabbanan. Yeah, Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita. In molelin et kedera b'Pesach. You're not allowed to put kemach inside of a kedera v'tavshil on Pesach. Why? Because maybe it's going to become chametz. But it says shimlol, and somebody wants to do it. Noten et kemach, and noten et chometz. First you put the kemach, the flour, and then you're going to put the chometz immediately, the vinegar, right? In order, if you remember that we said the vinegar is not going to make it into chametz. Some people say after noten et chometz, or you could put the chometz vinegar, then you put the kemach. Okay. So man yeshomrim. Who's the yeshomrim? Amar al-Chassa, says al-Chassa, Rabbi Yudahi. What's so funny? Yeah, it's Rav Chassa, says Rabbi Yudah. The Tanam, we learned in the Mishnah, Ha'ilpas. What is the Ilpas? It says over here, the Machvat. Yeah? Iowa. You see, when people are not with us, they just, their mind just... Ha'ilpas. Yeah, the Machvat. It's a type of a Machvat. It's a type of a frying pan. Or the kedera that they took it off when it's boiling hot. You're not allowed to put it on tavlin on Shabbat as long as it's still hot. Why? Because it's a kli rishon. Meaning on Shabbat, if I've got a kli rishon and I took it off, I took it off the fire, I'm not allowed to put a tavlin inside of it. Why? Because it's going to cook it. It's kli rishon. But you're allowed to put it inside of the kara tamchui, which means if I transfer the food onto a kara or tamchui, onto another place, now it's a kli sheni. I could put any types of spices. Rabbi Yudah says, you're allowed to put everything in a kli sheni, except for something that has chometz tzir, except for something that has vinegar and any type of brine. Why? Because according to him, the vinegar and the brine, it actually helps cooking, right? Even if it's going to be mixed with the food. So according to this Yeshomrim in the Braita that says you could even put the vinegar and then afterwards the kemach, that it helps, right? The chometz to actually quicken the process and to become chametz. It quicken the process and not become chametz. Because the vinegar is going to make it quickly become cooked, and therefore, since it's quickly going to become cooked, so then it's going to become chametz. So therefore, you're not allowed to put the vinegar inside of this, kli sheni or whatever it is, because if not, then it's going to quicken the cooking process, and then it's a sur. You're not allowed to cook on Shabbat.
Quick side question: you're not allowed to make ceviche on Shabbat.
What's ceviche again?
A raw fish, and you put lemons and limes, and it's
probably a sur.
Wow.
Probably asur, because that's
Peruvian special.
Which one?
It's a Peruvian special.
Yeah, it's probably asur because if that's what you need in order to make it cooked, so then you're cooking it on Shabbat.
So if you add any chometz to something that makes it.
Well, that's what it says here. It's going to quicken. It's pickling. Well, anyway, you're not allowed to pickle on Shabbat. Manashah, you're not allowed to pickle on Shabbat either. I cannot put pickles or cucumbers, right, in brine in order to pickle it. I'm not allowed to do it. And if I took it out and it's not ready, there's a whole question: am I allowed to put it back? Because again, you have a problem.
If you're going to consume it on Shabbat,
Even if you're not allowed to pickle anything on Shabbat.
Just putting lemon on the fish on Shabbat.
Do you know that there's a chumrah? I say it's a chumrah, but there's a machloket. Are you listening?
On raw fish, you can't. That's what he's saying.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a machloket, but there's a chumrah that, for example, let's say I want to make a lettuce salad. Some people say that I have to, that before even putting the salt, I have to put the oil. Because the oil takes away from the salt. Because if I'm going to put the salt, I'm like pickling it, and then it could be a problem.
Wow.
You understand? Again, it's a chumrah. Some people say, no, it's not a problem, whatever, but it exists a concept. So ask the Gemara, it says like this, V'nukma Rabbi Yosef. Why don't we just say that this Yeshomrim? Yeah? It says, why don't we just say that it's like this is going to be the Yeshomrim in Shitat Rabbi Yosef. The Taina, as we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Yosef says, if you see that you're going to come and you're going to be lotet seorim, right, that it's going to be, and you don't want it to become chametz, shoram bechometz vechometz somtan. Just soak it in vinegar, and vinegar will come and it'll stop the chimutz. Fine. So it says the Gemara, Ki Ashmina lel Rabbi Yosef. When do we learn this in Shitat Rabbi Yosef? Hanamila dita bene, only if it's there, which means that these are only talking about when the chometz is actually there in itself, without any type of mixture. But when it's with the mixture, right, then it's not as strong. So therefore, that's why it says you can't say that this Yeshomrim has to be like the Shitat of Rabbi Yosef, because it's not. It could be that maybe it's not Rabbi Yosef. Ula comes and he says, whether to put the chometz and then afterwards the kemach, or the kemach and then afterwards the chometz, meaning whether it's the vinegar into the flour or the flour into the vinegar. You're not allowed to do it because we're going to tell the Nazir, don't come close, which means don't come close to wine, to grapes or anything whatsoever, in order not to be nichshal ve'adam yisur. So too, we don't want to put the kemach inside of this thing, even when there's going to be vinegar, because we don't want a person to become into get into a problem of yisurim, right? Because we don't want that. So it means you could put vinegar, but you don't know how much vinegar, you don't know don't get yourself into problems. You understand? Don't get yourself into something that could be a big problem afterwards. Rav Papi, Rav Papi went and he permitted the Nachtomim to come and to put the Kedera, right? He says over here, the Kedera it says over here like this, in Lemimcha. How does it translate Lemimcha? To make a belila ava, to make a thick dough. So he comes and he says he's actually permitted the bakers to make a thick dough, right, of kemach with chitim klei, with toasted kernels. Rava says he says some people permit this in the place where there's a lot of avadim, right? Even when there's avadim, why? Because in the house of the Beis Sheguluta there's a lot of avadim, and the avadim, they are very mizalzel and isurim. So they're not fitting to come and to do these things, which means if it's you yourself doing the things in the kitchen, it doesn't say, it just says avadim, servants.
They say servants, it's not the Jew.
If it's not Jew, of course they will not be machmirim.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. So he says over here that in such a scenario, what happens is that we're going to start suspecting that maybe Bemet, right? That's what we're trying to suspect, that maybe Bemet, they're going to be mizalzel and all these types of isurim. Those that say Rav himself actually did it. Okay? So that's why. So if he's doing it himself, that's fine. But if he's getting servants to do these things, you have to be much more careful. Says the Mishnah, Memo Bet, you're not allowed to put flour inside of the charoset or the chardal and mustard. Why? Because it makes it into chametz. And if you did put the kemach into it, right? You have to eat it immediately before it becomes chametz. Rabbi says you're not allowed to eat it. You're not allowed to cook the Pesach, not in liquids or not in fruit juice. But you're allowed to actually anoint it. And you can actually dip it, right, in the mashkin and meperot. The water that was used by a baker in order to cool down, to wash his hands when he's coming in and doing the batzek, You have to throw it out immediately. Because if not, it's going to make it also into chametz. Because imagine you're putting your hands in to wash your hands, and then you come, you put it into the batek. After a little bit of while, it could actually make it into chametz.
Come and wash your hands again. Back to chametz.
Yeah, exactly. Back to the dough. So Amar Rav Kahana says the Gemara, machloket is letocha chardal. The machloket is only going to be inside of the chardal, because since it's going to be so charif, the chardal mustard is charif, so therefore it's not going to make it into become chametz very quickly. But letocha charoset, according to everybody, yisaref miyad, you have to burn it immediately, right? According to everybody, but since charoset is not charif, so therefore it will become chametz immediately. The time we also learned in the right. But the tocha chardal, that's when the machloket is in the Mishnah. Rabbi Min says yisaref miyad, the Chachamim says yachel miyad. You have to eat it immediately. So again, the machloket is only by chardal, because there, since it's so strong, maybe it's not going to become chametz. But if it's by charoset, according to everybody, it's going to become chametz. So Amar Rav Huna b'Rav Yehuda Shmuel says Shmuel halacha is like the rabbis, which is like the Tanakama. That's tibur, which is going to be placed into the kemach, is going to be permitted to eat immediately. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak to Rav Huna b'Rav Yehuda, acharoset kama mora chardal. Are you talking about the charoset or on the chardal? Which means you hold that the Chachamim arguing to be made also on charoset or only on chardal. Amalei lemay nafkamina. What's the nafkamina? So he says the nafkamina is going to be to Rav Kahana. Tamar Rav Kahana, but Rav Kahana says machloket is a toch chardal, but a toch charoset according to everybody yisaref miyad. Okay, Bezat Hashem, we continue tomorrow. So Baruch Hashem.